Brothers, tarnished, and all those who have died way too many times. Today I present to you the most OP and game-breaking weapon I've used in Elden Ring. We welcome the Marais Executioner's Sword. Now, this sword was already good in the base game, but the DLC has added some additional items, making this build even stronger. This build is beyond broken to the point where we're able to do up to 20,000 damage to an enemy. As you can see right now, this build makes Mesmer look like one of these blokes. And honestly, this boss the first time round gave me real issues. The weapon can be found in the shaded castle in the base game, and is obtained by going through the castle and finally defeating the final boss who's wielding the weapon themselves. So yeah, we are talking about one of the best DPS weapons in the game, and with the correct talismans, buffs, stats, and armor, we're able to maximize our chance of one-shotting bosses. This greatsword scales with both strength and arcane, and deals both physical and magic damage. The main reason for using this sword is simply because of the unique skill, Uchard's Dancing Blade, which spins the blade in front of us, dealing multiple hits in quick succession. As many of you will know from my past videos, we can buff this mechanic like crazy. But before we get too much into the buffs for the build, let's start with the stats for the build. And this is going to be a new game plus, but of course you can use this weapon your first time through and make your build more powerful over time. But as with all of my builds, I recommend running 50 at Vigor to allow us to at least take a hit. As you can see by the gameplay, I take a hit a good few times, so I need this. But if you are more confident, then feel free to reduce this and pump the other stats which increase damage, such as strength and arcane. For mind, we're going for 20. This is only just to use our skill and also to apply our buffs for the build. Again, as always, we're using Golden Vow here, which boosts our damage by 15% and also provides us with a damage negation. We're also running Flame Grant Me Strength for that extra damage boost also. 35 endurance is all we need here. We could even reduce this stat to 25, as the skill doesn't require a whole load of endurance to execute. Now on to our main stat, which is going to be strength, and for this you'll want to pump this all the way up to 80. This is going to increase our damage for the build, and for this you'll want this as high as possible. For dexterity, we're only going for 14. We do need at least 19 dexterity in order for us to wield the weapon, but the Millicent's Prosthesis Talisman will allow us to keep the main stat at 14, as the talisman gives us the additional 5. For faith, as always, we're going to keep this at 25 to allow us to use our buffs for the build, and finally, arcane, we want this at least 40. But this is where you're going to want to put your extra points if you do have any, as the weapon also scales well with this stat. And next up we got the armor for the build. We aren't going for pure fashion here, unfortunately lads. We have to settle for the belly dancer look and go for the dancer set, as this will boost our damage of the weapon skill by 10%. A small price to pay for maximum damage output. Of course you can change your armor here to anything you'd like, but alternative would be the Rakshashka armor set, which gives us an additional 8% damage increase instead, but does increase our damage taken, but the look will be much more appealing in my opinion. Moving on to the talismans for the build, and of course this build is nothing without the talismans, which are increasing our attack power and also boosting our skill. So here are the talismans which you must use with this build. First up we've got the Shard of Alexander, which is a must in all builds when you're using the skill. And it's going to provide us with increased damage to our weapon skill, and of course this is your bread and butter of the build, and this is what we're going to be building around here. The next talisman which you're going to be using is the Godfrey Icon, which boosts our attack power with charge attacks, and we're going to be charging this boy up to the full amount for maximum damage. We are expecting to do at least 10 attacks per charge of the skill, and therefore our first buff to these successive attacks comes with the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which will significantly boost our damage when using the skill, and this is a must for the build as this will stack with our final talisman, which is going to be the Millicent's Prosthesis, which provides us with the 5 dexterity needed to wield the weapon, whilst also providing us with that vital increase to our successive attacks. And keep it on track with increasing our attack power from successive attacks, we are going to have to include the Thorny Cracked Tear in our Flask of Wondrous Physic, and we're going to pair this with the blood-sucking tier for maximum damage. This tier does come at a cost of constant health drain, but with this build we're not planning on being in the fight long enough for us to even notice this. We're expecting to defeat this boss in just a few charges of our skill, if that. So moving on to how we're going to play this build, and of course not every enemy is just going to stand there and just let you get off a fully charged attack of the skill. So we have to mention the staggering ability of the weapon, which is just an added bonus. With just a few charged heavy attacks, we're able to stagger our enemy, which gives us enough time to fully charge the skill and destroy most enemies in just one hit. Now, this is without a doubt the best weapon that I have used in Elden Ring right now. After my Blasphemous Blade build, I honestly thought it couldn't get any better than that. But how wrong could I be, as this weapon has taken down some of the hardest bosses I encountered the first time around. Apart from supplying a ton of damage, this build is always just going to be so fun to use, and considering the weapon is obtainable in the mid-game of the base game, it just means you can slowly build this weapon and build up over your playthrough, seeing it grow and just turn into an absolute monster. This definitely isn't one to miss for sure, and if it does help you out, and if you enjoy this video, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe for more Elden Ring content and general RPG content in the future. Catch you in the next one, fellas.